The largest number of world's poor live in Africa. The poorest of the poor live in abject poverty on a total income of less than $1 per day. The countries in the poorest of the poor in Africa are scattered across the continent, from West Africa to Indian Ocean, throughout Sub-Sahara Africa to the Horn of Africa. The economies of these 20 countries share a common theme: disaster, both natural and man-made. There are people in almost every country who live in fear of poverty, most of whom, even in the poorest country in Africa, work hard to avoid it. In these poor countries in Africa, sadly, it's not enough to avoid the crushing reality of want. Here are the reasons people in 20 countries face enormous obstacles to find a way forward from poverty. We have ranked these countries in terms of GDP, that is, gross domestic product per capita, the total economic production of the country divided by the number of people in the country. But we also list each country's GNI, that is, gross national income per capita, the amount of money per person that stays in the country out of all the values of goods and services it produces. These figures can be very different, and that too tells a story. Number 20 is Benin. Benin have a GDP of $2,552 and a GNI of $1,280. Benin economy is highly dependent on agriculture, primarily cotton and palm oil. Millions of its people are engaged in subsistence farming, growing food for their own needs. Almost 75% of its people working in the formal economy are represented by unions, who may be responsible for the country's relative success at taking care of its poor. The number 19, Chad. Chad had a GDP of $2,428 and a GNI of $680. In August 2021, Chad's former dictator and strongman Hissène Habré, who had ordered the death of as many as 10,000 of his citizens by exotic and cruel methods in the swimming pool of his mansion and his garage, died of COVID-19. Even though he had been removed from power in 2015, he had left his mark on Chad's people and its economy. For many years, local businesses suffered from civil war and foreign businesses did not make investments. Only in the last 2 or 3 years has there been some revival of Chad's cotton industry and in the mining of natron used to make laundry detergent. Even the major income of those industries seem to go mostly to people who live outside of Chad, as evidenced by Chad's per capita GDP of $2,428 and its per capita GNI of $680. Now the number 18 is Guinea. Guinea have a GDP of $2,320 and a GNI of $4,760. Guinea is experiencing economic growth and political chaos as it becomes more and more of a bauxite and iron mining center for Chinese industries. The benefits of economic growth aren't reaching Guinea's people directly because of its 60 years history of ethnic violence, political upheaval, and police corruption. Experts of the countries send substantial remittances home, however. Now the number 17 is Gambia. Gambia have a GDP of $2,278 and a GNI of $2,240. Gambia does a good job for managing its limited resources. Much of its economy depends on tourists, which is beginning to recover from COVID-19. Now the number 16 is Mali. Mali have a GDP of $2,271 and a GNI of $830. The poverty of this exporter of cotton and gold is explained by the fact that money that is made in Mali doesn't stay in Mali, and by inter-ethnic and jihad violence complicated by a never-ending succession of coups Even with 150,000 foreign peacekeeper troops, including 5,000 from France and 1,000 from the USA, over 2 million of Mali's 20 million people have been driven from their homes in the last 2 years, and over 250,000 have been killed. Now the number 15 is Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso have a GDP of $2,207 and a GNI of $790. Burkina Faso documented gold ore but gets most of its income from foreign aid. Most of its population is engaged in agriculture, raising corn, sorghum, millet and rice. The nation has a history of political unrest and military mutiny, however depriving it of its benefit of rule and law and dependable government institution. Now number 14. The number 14 is Guinea-Bissau. Guinea-Bissau have a GDP of $1,951 and a GNI of $1,020. After a long, bitter war to oust its Portuguese ruler, Guinea-Bissau endured a dictatorship, coups, and another civil war. It has never had a president finish his 5-year elected term. Most of the Guinea-Bissau make subsistence living from fishing and growing cashew or peanuts. A few residents of the country's coastal island have found economic opportunity in drug smuggling, with enough volume to give the country its nickname Pusher's Parade. The country has no funds of its own to fight the drug kingpins. The number 13 is Togo. Togo have a GDP of $1,821 and a GNI of $920. In recent years, Togo has achieved both a growing GDP and well-controlled inflation. Its government coffer, however, depends on taxes imposed on phosphate mining and rise and fall with fertilizers prices. Most of the people of Togo still depend on subsistence farming for their livelihood. Now the number 12 is Eritrea. Eritrea has a GDP of $1,820 and a GNI of $699. Eritrea is often called Africa's North Korea, fighting a battle for independence from Ethiopia from 1960s until 1990. It enjoyed independence for only 8 years before starting a bloody war with Ethiopia in 1998, which only ended in 2018. Eritrea, like North Korea, became a military state with forced military service and forced labor for all except women who can demonstrate that they are ready to have children and others with substantial financial resources. For several years, the largest number of refugees from Africa seeking to enter Europe were from Eritrea. Now the number 11 is Madagascar. Madagascar have a GDP of $1,697 and a GNI of $1,540. Over 2 million people in Madagascar are in danger of imminent starvation due to the prolonged droughts. Once one of the most spectacular centers for biodiversity in the planet, with 90% of its wildlife found nowhere else on the planet, Madagascar now has vast area of complete destruction of the landscape from droughts and fire. Relative bright spots in Madagascar's economy include nickel mines, textile production and fishery. Number 10 is Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone has a GDP of $1,608 and a GNI of $1,670. Like its neighbor Liberia, Sierra Leone has been devastated by civil war and an Ebola pandemic. Unlike Liberia, Sierra Leone has also been plagued by natural disasters, especially mudslides. 1/3 of the population is engaged in subsistence farming, raising rice. However, Sierra Leone is one of the few of the poorest countries in Africa that has a higher GNI than GDP. experts from Sierra Leone managed to send substantial amount of money to their families still in the country. Now the number 9 is South Sudan. South Sudan have a GDP of $1,420 and a GNI of $1,090. The economy of the Republic of South Sudan is one of the most underdeveloped in the world. It has one of the world's highest infant mortality rates and one of the world's highest rate of illiteracy in women. It has one of the youngest population in the world, with over 40% of its population under age of 14, and it has a range of mineral resources including oil, gas, iron, chromium, tungsten, copper, gold, silver, and diamonds. Income disparity is severe. The average per capita daily income in South Sudan is $3.20 a day, but 90% of the population live in less than $1 per day. The number 8 is Liberia. Liberia has a GDP of $1,413 and a GNI of $530. Liberia was founded in 1820s as a refuge for former American slaves. It has come out of a horrific civil war under a woman-led government that rebuilt schools, hospitals, roads that had been destroyed during the fighting. But an Ebola epidemic in 2014 and the completion of the international aid program in 2017 have led the country to face its considerable economic challenges on its own. Number 7 is Mozambique. Mozambique have a GDP of $1,331 and a GNI of $460. There are some income in Mozambique, but the $871 disparity between GDP and GNP shows that it does not go to Mozambicans. Mozambique has invited troops from other African nations to fight its Islamic insurgents so that it can concentrate on recovering from the theft of $2 billion in loan fund intended to shore up its fragile economy. One bright note in Mozambique's elephant head have undergone a mutation so that newborn elephants don't have tusks and will not be killed by podcasts. The number 6 is Malawi. Malawi has a GDP of $1,234 and a GNI of $500. Over 70% of Malawians earn less than the UN poverty level wage of $1.90 per day. Compounding this reality is another. Most of Malawi's workers have jobs in agriculture, which is plagued by increasing common drought and flood. Farmers are too poor to buy tractors and fertilizers. The World Bank estimates that the tiny 0.8 acre, that is 0.3 hectares, Malawi farm produces only 11 to 18% of its potential yield. Making matters worse, Malawi's one magnificent lake, Chiwa, was largely dried up, putting 7,000 fishermen out of work. The number 5 is Niger. Niger have a GDP of $1,213 and a GNI of $540. In 2021, Niger experienced its first peaceful transfer of power with the inauguration of its president, Mohamed Bazoum. The newly stable country, unfortunately, is trapped between enemies of the Islamic State and Boko Haram. And the United Nations Development Index rank Niger is the poorest country on earth, simultaneously experiencing an explosion in its birth rate and a chronic drought that leave over 2 million of its citizens in danger of starvation. Even in a good year, the United Nations says Niger cannot feed itself. The number 4 is Somalia. Somalia have a GDP of $888 and a GNI of $310. Somalia has become synonymous with violence, lawlessness, and extreme poverty. About 43% of its population live in less than $1 per day. and the leading industry in the country is livestock production. In recent years, however, conditions have stabilized enough that foreign companies are investing in Somalia as a producer of halal meats for consumption in nearby countries, bringing living standards back to where they were in the early 90s. Much of the country survived on remittance sent back by expat Somalis. The number 3 is Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC. DRC GDP is $843 and GNI of $550. Mining for the rare earths essential for making electric cars and cell phones is the Democratic Republic of Congo's greatest potential and its biggest worry. This rich equatorial rainforest country has been the world's leading supplier of cobalt since 1908. It provided the high-grade uranium ore the United States used to make its atomic bomb in World War II, although American capital kept mines going in the 2000s. The country has recently sold its mineral concession to the Chinese conglomerates. For ordinary Congolese, there are few civil rights, no employment rights, and little choice but to take basic jobs. The economic production of the country is mostly controlled by the mines. And the second most poorest country in Africa is Central African Republic. Central African Republic have a GDP of $823 and a GNI of $510. The Central African Republic has endured decades of religious violence and civil war. For much of the last 20 years, the central government has controlled only the capital, and in 2013, even the capital was taken over by a rebel group. Central Africans have been driven out of their homes into refugee camps and then driven out of their refugee camps. Since 2016, the UN peacekeeping troops have brought some stability to the country, and the World Bank has invested in small business development, but the lawlessness, disease, and lack of infrastructure cripple the economy. Now, the number 1 most poorest country in Africa is Burundi. Burundi have a GDP of $727 and a GNI of $210. What is the poorest country in Africa 2022? Sadly, it is perennially impoverished Burundi. Almost any top 20 poorest country in Africa list from the past 50 years will include Burundi. Like its neighbor Rwanda, Burundi passed through a period of turbulence in the 1990s, during which it saw genocide against Tutsi minority by its Hutu majority. Like its neighbor Rwanda, Burundi is tiny, landlocked, densely populated, and deficient in natural resources. But Burundi's economy is a fraction of its neighbor Rwanda. Why? Although neither country is democratic, Rwanda has a functioning government and rule of law. The lack of legal protection for investment has discouraged businesses from coming to Burundi to make profits with its willing workforce, and the large disparity between GDP and GNI suggests that non-citizens, many of them with relief organizations, make up much of its workforce. Every poor country in Africa stands in need of judicial reform. There is general agreement that providing stable government and rule of law while stamping out corruption make dealings with other problems much easier. These 20 poorest countries in Africa have a long way to go, but there is hope that legal reform and economic reform may give them the stability they need to deal with environmental challenges and war.